You open a letter, put your glasses on, and think, I will deal with that tomorrow. Tomorrow turns into next week, then next month, and nothing feels urgent at all. The bills still go out, the kettle still boils, and life looks normal enough. Then one quiet morning you realize the money you were counting on has not arrived. And if you like having someone calmly talk these things through with you, do subscribe. Think of it as keeping a sensible voice nearby for the bits of later life nobody explains properly. This channel is for ordinary people who want straight answers without the drama. That matters, especially when the system expects you to know more than it ever told you. Today we are talking about the state pension mistake almost every retiree will make in 2026. It is not one grand disaster made by reckless people. It is a slow, ordinary mistake made by decent people who assume the system will sort itself out. That is the theme all the way through this video, because assumption is, what does the damage? The first mistake begins with a very familiar scene. You know your birthday is coming, you know your pension age is near, and you think the payment will simply start. After all, the government knows your age, your national insurance number, and where you live. So your brain tells you there is nothing to do except wait. But the state pension does not start by magic. For most people, you have to claim it, and if you do not claim it, it does not just roll in politely. A lot of people only discover that after a missing payment, a delayed form, or a stressful phone call. That is why the first rule today is simple and worth writing down. No claim, no pay. That little phrase may sound blunt, but it saves a world of muddle. In 2026, many people will still assume the letter means the money is already on the way. It does not mean that, and that is where the trouble begins. You will usually get an invitation letter around the time you are approaching state pension age. If it arrives, open it, read it, and act on it, rather than placing it in the pile for later. If no letter turns up, do not treat silence as good news. Silence is not a payment plan, and silence is not a claim. Some people listening to me now will know exactly the sort of delay I mean. A form sits by the fruit bowl, a code is in an envelope, and life gets in the way. A grandchild needs picking up, a boiler needs fixing, somebody is not well, and the week disappears. That is how ordinary drift turns into missing weeks of income. The real point is not that you are careless. The real point is that retirement admin often arrives dressed as ordinary post, and ordinary post never feels urgent. That is why this whole video keeps coming back to one idea. Do not assume your state pension will sort itself out just because your date of birth exists on a screen somewhere. If that kind of plain warning is useful, subscribe and stay with me. I would rather gently remind you now than see you chasing money that should already be in your account. Sometimes the most valuable financial advice is not clever at all. It is simply knowing which small thing must not be left for next Tuesday. The second mistake is believing everybody gets the full state pension. You hear a figure in the news, hear someone at the shops mention it, and the mind settles on that number. For 2026 to 2027, the full new state pension is £241.30 a week. But full does not mean automatic, and it certainly does not mean universal. Your amount depends on your national insurance record. In plain English, that means the system looks at your qualifying years and your past record. For some people, especially those with older work histories, time spent contracted out can affect the amount. So when someone says everybody gets the same, please do not build your budget on that sentence. Here is the relief phrase for this part: forecast first, feelings second. Not what your brother gets, not what your neighbor says, not what you think sounds about right. Your own forecast is what matters, because your own record is what gets paid. That forecast is important for another reason as well. It can show how much you could get when you can get it, and whether you may be able to increase it. Sometimes the answer is that you are fine and can stop worrying. Sometimes the answer is that there are gaps worth looking at before the door closes. Let me give you a real sort of person, even though the name is made up. Martin is 66, lives in Derby, worked for years, did a spell self-employed, and assumed he was sorted. He had heard all his life that 35 years meant the full amount, so he stopped there mentally. When he finally checked, the record was not as tidy as the story he had been telling himself. He was not foolish. He was simply using a pub version of the rules instead of his own record. That happens every day, especially to people who worked through different systems over a long life. And the longer your working life, the more chance there is that your record is not as neat as you imagine. So the second principle is this: do not budget from rumor. Budget from your forecast, your record, and the amount attached to your name. That is how you turn the state pension from a guess into a proper part of your retirement plan. If you want a channel that keeps saying, check the record before trusting the story, subscribe. That habit alone can save people a lot of worry in later life. It is not exciting advice, I know, but boring habits are often what keep retirement stable. The third mistake is thinking the amount paid into your bank is the same thing as the amount you truly keep. A lot of retirees are shocked not by the pension itself, but by what happens around tax. They start receiving the state pension, perhaps alongside a private pension or part-time wages, and the numbers feel odd. Something looks lower somewhere, and no one seems to have explained why. The state pension is taxable income. That is the plain version. But tax is not usually taken straight off the state pension payment itself, in the tidy way many people expect. Instead, if you also have a private pension or earnings, tax is often collected through those other payments. That means one income stream can suddenly look smaller because it is carrying tax for another. You can imagine how confusing that feels if nobody warned you beforehand. People think their private pension firm has made a mistake, or HMRC has pounced out of nowhere. Quite often, it is simply the system collecting the tax in a way that feels back to front. Here is the phrase to keep: gross in, tax later. In other words, do not look at your state pension in isolation and assume the rest of the picture will behave normally. Retirement income is a shared picture. If you have more than one income source, the tax can move around in ways that catch you off guard. Margaret, let us say, is 69 and still does 2 mornings a week at the local florist. She starts getting her state pension and notices her work pay looks a bit meaner than before. She feels a flash of anger and thinks somebody has altered her pay without telling her. In truth, the tax has been adjusted because the system is trying to collect what is due overall. Now, that does not mean every tax code is right. Far from it. It does mean you should not panic at the first strange-looking payment. Check the tax code, read the letters, and compare the figures before assuming someone has robbed you. If the state pension is your only income and it goes over your personal allowance, you may hear from HMRC another way. Some people get a simple assessment tax bill rather than seeing tax clipped off elsewhere. Again, the key problem is not just tax, it is surprise, because surprise makes ordinary people feel frightened when they need to feel steady. So the third lesson returns us to the same theme. Do not assume the money that lands is the whole story. Understand how the tax is being gathered, and you keep control of your own calm. That matters just as much as the amount itself. If this sort of slow, careful unpacking helps, perhaps subscribe and keep me company. A lot of channels rush past the bits that actually trip people up. I would rather sit with the confusing part until it makes sense. That is usually where the real value is. The fourth mistake is saying, I will not qualify for anything else, so there is no point checking. That sentence quietly costs older people a great deal of money every year. Once the state pension starts, or even just before it starts, other support may become relevant as well. But pride, guesswork, and tiredness stop people from looking. Pension credit is the big one people wrongly talk themselves out of. Many hear the words and imagine it is only for somebody far worse off than they are. In reality, it can apply more widely than people think, and it can open the door to other help. So never dismiss it because you own a decent coat and keep the lights on. Savings matter, yes, but not in the way many people assume. If you have more than £10,000 in savings or investments, that can affect how much pension credit you get. It does not automatically mean you get nothing. That is a very important difference, and many people never make the check because they think one pot of savings ends the conversation. There is also timing. You can start a pension credit application before reaching state pension age, and claims can be backdated by up to 3 months if you were eligible. That may not sound dramatic, but 3 months of missed support is real money. And once money is missed through assumption, it still hurts even if the mistake felt understandable. The phrase for this section is one I really want you to keep. Small claim, bigger doorway. Because pension credit is not always just about the payment itself. It can link you to wider help, and that is where the practical difference in daily life often shows up. June is a good example of this sort of person. She is 74, widowed, careful with money, and the sort who washes freezer bags and never wastes a thing. She assumed she was too respectable, too settled, and too sensible to qualify for extra help. So she paid her full council tax and carried on trimming her heating to save a few pounds a week. When her daughter finally pushed her to check, the relief was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet. It was the relief of not having to feel guilty every time she turned the thermostat up a notch. That is what missed support looks like in real life. Council tax reduction matters here too. Your local council runs the scheme, and what you get depends on your circumstances and where you live. But many pensioners never apply because they assume owning their home means the answer must be no. That is another case of assumption doing the damage before the council ever gets the chance to answer. So the fourth lesson is not just about benefits, it is about dignity. Do not write your own refusal letter before the proper system has even looked at you. Check first, decide second, and keep your pride for better things. If you know someone who always says, "Others need it more than me," you may know exactly why this matters. And if you would like more of these calm reminders, subscribe. This channel is really for people who have done their best all their lives and simply want a fair reading of the rules. There is nothing pushy about that, and nothing to be ashamed of either. The fifth mistake is drifting into deferral without meaning to. Some people decide to wait on purpose, and that can be a real financial choice. But others simply do not claim in time, and only later realize they have effectively deferred by accident. That is a very different thing from making a clear, informed decision. Under the rules, if you do not claim your state pension at state pension age, it can automatically defer. That means delay has consequences, even if you never sat down and said, "I choose to delay." For some people, deferring may increase what they get later, but more is not always better if you gave up months of income you needed now. This is where people can talk themselves into a very tidy-sounding mistake. They say, "I am still working, so I might as well leave it." Or they say, "I have heard waiting always pays." Always is a dangerous word in personal finance, especially around retirement. Here is the phrase I would write on the fridge: delay by decision, not by drift. If you are going to defer, let it be because you have looked at your own position, your health, your other income, and your plans. Do not let a missing form make the choice on your behalf. Raj is 66, still works 3 days a week, and likes the idea of not touching the state pension yet. Nothing wrong with that at all. But his good decision only stays good if it is actually a decision. If he has not checked the numbers, the tax, and the trade-off, then it is only a guess dressed up as a strategy. There is another wrinkle. Certain benefits can affect how deferral works in practice, and some people assume they can build up extra while support is in payment, when that is not how it works. This is why broad rules heard in passing are so risky. Retirement is personal, and the right answer belongs to your own circumstances. So, the fifth lesson is steady and simple. Waiting can be wise, but accidental waiting is rarely wise. If you defer, do it on purpose, with your eyes open and with a written reason you could explain to yourself in one sentence. That is how grown-up decisions stay grown-up. If it helps having someone say, "Slow down and choose rather than drift," do subscribe. Not because subscriptions are magical, but because repetition helps when life gets busy. A good reminder at the right moment can stop a very ordinary mistake, and most retirement mistakes begin as ordinary moments. The sixth mistake is trusting the wrong voice at the wrong time. Retirement brings letters, codes, reviews, pension talk, tax talk, and sometimes loneliness as well. That mix creates perfect conditions for a scammer. They only need you to be distracted, flattered, worried, or rushed for a few minutes. Scammers love pensions because pension money looks substantial and emotionally loaded. They promise high returns and low risk. They offer a free review, a special opportunity, or a clever way to unlock money early. And they speak with exactly the sort of confidence ordinary people have been trained to trust. One warning sign could not be clearer. Cold calling about pensions is illegal and likely a scam, but modern scams are not always a cold call from a stranger with a noisy line. They can be a polished website, a text message, a social media advert, or even a message passed through somebody you know. The phrase for this part is short for a reason. Pause, check, call back. Not on the number they gave you, not on the link in the message, on the official number you found yourself, from the real provider or the real government page. Sandra, aged 72, got a message saying her pension details needed updating to avoid disruption. It looked tidy, official, and mildly urgent, which is exactly how these things are designed. She nearly tapped the link while standing in the kitchen with shopping half unpacked. That is how quickly a bad decision can arrive in an ordinary afternoon. What saved her was not special training. It was a pause. She put the phone down, made a cup of tea, and rang the proper number from old paperwork she already had. The message was fake, and that 5-minute pause protected years of savings. Please remember this. Professional sounding does not mean genuine. Urgent sounding does not mean true. And kind older people are not weak targets because they are silly, but because they are decent and assume other people are decent too. So the sixth lesson brings us right back to our theme one last time. Do not assume the voice speaking to you is the right voice. Do not assume the letter is genuine, the link is safe, or the review is in your interest. A calm pause is one of the strongest financial protections you have. If you want this channel to keep being that calm pause in your week, subscribe. I mean that sincerely. Sometimes people do not need more information nearly as much as they need a steady voice saying, "Hold on, check that first." That is what I hope this space can be. So let us gather the whole thing together. The big mistake almost every retiree will make in 2026 is assuming the state pension is automatic, obvious, and self-correcting. It is not. You need to claim it properly, check the amount, understand the tax, look for linked help, choose deferral on purpose, and stay alert to scams. If you want a simple ritual, here is one. Set aside one quiet hour with a mug of tea, your national insurance number, your bank details, and every pension letter in one place. Check your forecast, check your claim timing, check your tax code, and check whether pension credit or council tax reduction deserve a proper look. 1 hour of honest checking can spare you months of muddle. And if, while listening, one person keeps coming into your mind, do send this to them. Maybe it is your brother who thinks the government just knows. Maybe it is your neighbor who never claims anything, or your mum, your dad, or an older friend who always says they will sort it later. Shared at the right time, this sort of information is not a favor to the channel, but a kindness to a person. I think of the state pension like the front gate to a quiet, well-kept garden. For years you have been walking towards it, assuming it will swing open the moment you arrive. But the gate still has a latch, and a latch only works when someone calmly lifts it. Once you know that, you stop pushing in frustration and simply open the gate the right way. That is the heart of it. Later, life feels far steadier when you replace assumption with 1 or 2 clear checks. And very often, peace does not come from having more money than everyone else, but from knowing your own gate is properly open.